Hello and welcome back to another All Things M365 compliance. And I am Ryan Murphy, compliance practice lead at Epic Global. And of course, I'm joined by Nikki. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Nikki Chappell. I'm the Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway and a Microsoft MVP, and I'm passionate about everything Microsoft 365 compliance. And today we're joined by Shabaz Darr, who, over to you. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. So my name's Shabaz Darr. I'm a master at Netcompany. So it's a Danish-based company. I'm based in the UK. And my sort of areas of focus are around identity, security, Azure, infrastructure service, and sort of AVD. And I'm really happy to be on today. If I'm honest, I've as we're going to talk about today, especially IAM compliance kind of comes hand in hand with all sorts of type of security. So a lot of my focus and the sort of projects that I'm doing and customers I'm working with, this is very, very key. So it's a good time for me to be on the show, I think.
Welcome, Shabazz. Welcome. Happy to have you on. So, yeah, I am identity and access management. In a very high level, for those who are listening that really don't know what IAM is and what it's about, give us a quick example.
Yeah. So my background is sort of on premises, where you used to have Active Directory and that sort of stuff. But I always used to think that the baseline of like your on premises is your network. When you go to cloud, that that dynamic changes. Your baseline and your basically everything sits on top of your IAM. It can be PAS, SAS, IaaS, doesn't matter. It all needs identity to function, which makes it such a key aspect of cloud. And it integrates with everything like we're speaking about compliance, security, governance. That all needs IAM to function. You can't talk about security without talking about IAM. You can't talk about compliance without talking about IAM.
Perfect.
And there's different elements of it as well. It's not just all cloud. You've got hybrid, as well, which comes into play. And a lot of the clients I'm working with are sort of hybrid customers, and they've got an IAM presence on premises like Active Directory, and they're using that as a sort of source, but then having that integration with Azure AD and that cloud IAM to use all the sort of all the good stuff we're going to talk about today, the security, the compliance that comes with Microsoft 365.
Perfect. And if you're new to this particular area, and I'm sure you've got lots of real world examples to share, multi-factor authentication, the amount of
Yeah.
businesses that still don't turn this on from point one, what it's hard to say, but what's your experience with those companies that assess it, say it's too busy to turn on for the users? Was that a good place to start, so to speak?
It's going to sound funny, but people don't realize they need MFA until they need MFA. Like they'll have a
Exactly.
security, they'll have an incident where MFA would have protected them, and they'll be like, right, let's have a review of why this happened. What could we have done to prevent it from happening? We could have had MFA. You looked at it a year ago and you're still not.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a best practice. It should be the norm. Like doing best practice. When you talk about best practice, you should do this. You should, this is this is what we recommend. It should be before that, before you even get to what best practice can we put in place. MFA should be part of your normal. Okay, we're going to look at this cloud service. Right? We're going to implement MFA as a baseline. It shouldn't be something you think of as an after. Okay, we've got this application in now. How are we going to make it compliant? How are we going to protect it? It should be before that, in my opinion.
So I think Microsoft state that just having MFA will stop 99.9% of attacks. That's a huge kind of, when you're looking at risk mitigation strategies, it is the number one thing. People putting so much personal and sensitive and commercial type of data in Microsoft 365. It's used for everything now. That everyone's saying move off premise, move all your data into the cloud. It's more secure in the cloud.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got that MFA, you're just open to so much risk of identity theft.
It isn't, and the only reason I've ever heard, this isn't even a good reason, is user adoption. But companies don't want to. They're afraid of their users having to change the way they work, and it is a change in in how you work. But again, it's about that whole zero trust piece. How zero trust, you can be as strict as you want with that whole zero trust piece, but and Microsoft have their recommendations around it. But it's about doing what fits your business. MFA should be as a minimum, but then making sure you've got least privilege in place without hindering your users is what a lot of companies get wrong. And I've experienced that at previous workplaces where things were so locked down, it made it difficult to do our jobs. And that's what and I think that's what businesses are scared of. But again, they don't understand, because they don't understand it. That's why.
Yeah, and I think that bit about particularly, if they lock it down, it's that balancing, isn't it, between security and productivity. And with Microsoft 365, you can get that balance right. It's having that appropriate levels of control for the appropriate levels of data. So that's why these two kind of areas go in hand by hand, because we're looking at what levels of classification do you have on the data. Well, if it's public data, well, you can be more flexible. But if it's your crown jewels, your corporate secrets, then you want to make sure you've got the very strictest level of controls in place.
And it's like, there's always been a thing around how many global admins should you have and how much access should you give to your IT team admins. There might be someone who on premises, he was a domain admin, he was, he had enterprise, that he had all the rights. When they moved to cloud, he's like, well, I need those same rights. Well, to do your job, no, you don't. And well, how am I what if I need access? Well, there's things in place. There's just-in-time access. There's access, reviews and all that sort of stuff that allows you to put that least privilege in place without hindering people. They can ask for access when they need it, not always have it, which is a massive risk.
And asking for access when you need it and for the time that you need it gives you just-in-time access and privileged identity management, right? So you can essentially set these controls up, Shabaz, to say, okay, Ryan's an Exchange admin, but he doesn't need full rights for Exchange. And if there's like a change, or I have to do a CU update, or I have to make some, detrimental changes up in the cloud or wherever it may be, I can request that, right? And I can have that for a certain period of time. I can execute that piece of work. So having privileged identity management, I think, is a certain bonus. But there's other elements to that as well. And there's just-in-time access for the groups and so on and so forth. So telling us a little bit about that would be ideal.
Yeah, the technologies we're all talking about, they're all there. But I think sometimes it's the process that sits behind that. So it's all well and good using just-in-time access and access reviews and stuff like that, but you need to have that process behind it where you have the correct people who are going to be authorizing going to be the approvers, who are the request, and it's that's very important as well. Not just the technology is all there, but we've mentioned a few just there, like with PIM and stuff like that, PIM and RBAC, but it's about having the processes that sit behind it, and that's what I spend a lot of. That's what I'm spending a lot of time at the moment working on with especially clients that are going new into the cloud. They want to understand the processes involved. They like the idea of all PIM and RBAC and just-in-time access and all access reviews. They love the idea of it and they see the use for it. But it's how can we realistically implement that and put a process behind it that is going to be efficient. Like, you don't want, like you said, you're an Exchange admin. You don't want to have that request waiting there for weeks and weeks because the approver's gone on holiday. Yeah. Well, there needs to be a group. There needs to be, like you said, an approvers group in place, and who are they? Where do they sit in the organisation? And do you know what I mean? There's a lot of process behind it that I think is probably the most difficult thing to get across.
Yeah, I think it's always that people, process, and technology. It's Microsoft is just a tool at the end of the day. People need that user adoption, and a lot of the times I find user adoption is targeted at the end users. But I think you're right. It's taking the IT teams, the security teams through that change process to say it is a different way of working when you start moving to the cloud.
Got to remember that a lot of the admins, and I was one. I used to have full domain admin access when at my previous company, because I was a trusted person. But for those people that are used to having that carte blanche access across the board, it's a change for them, and they've got to adopt it as well. They've got to adopt a new way of working, a more secure way of working. But and in the end, it's going to be much better for them as an organisation. But that is always tricky as well.
So we at Epic, and me specifically, we're working with a huge company at the moment to adopt e-discovery. premium in 365, and they're at a process at the moment where they have 10 or 11 e-discovery managers who have full access to do whatever they want. Okay, and and I mean do whatever you want. They could even have the permissions to purge items, expel
Wow.
data out, export data out of 365. Nikki, your blog around just-in-time access for the groups and so on and so forth, which I'm sure we can share later on, that was such a help to us to move forward with this business, because we were like, you give them full access indefinitely forever, and they're like, yeah. So taking that process, like, well, why do you do that? We just don't have a process to basically break the just-in-time access down. This company, even though they're using E5 for a lot of their users, they didn't even know that they had privileged identity management. They didn't even know PIM was part of Azure
Yeah.
and just-in-time access and so on and so forth. So that people process piece that you were just talking about, Nikki, we really had to break it down for them and essentially change their target operating model to fit in with the modern workplace. And now they have e-discovery roles that are skinny roles, as they like to call them, where you can just create, a case and add custodians in. And then the more senior e-discovery managers, they use privileged identity management, just-in-time access, until that case is finished. Once that's it, those permissions are gone and they're back to really light, least privileged possible. So I think your blog, Nikki, and that people and process piece that Shabaz was just talking about goes well together with identity access management.
I'm working with a client at the moment on records management. And again, the same with e-discovery. You've got that capability with the disposition reviews to have, really highly privileged access that even a global admin doesn't have access to. And I think the really good thing with the identity management is you can create your own role groups, so you don't have to have the predefined ones. So you can actually say, I'm just going to give you this one part of a role group and give you very, very granular levels of control. And I think people don't investigate that too much. I think it's as you mentioned earlier, people used to have access to everything just in case. So it's really easy. I'll just give them global access just in case.
And the sort of things with the sort of technologies that we've spoken about, services like PIM, RBAC, and I mean, although RBAC was probably available, it's been around for a while, but just-in-time access reviews, all the compliance, purview and these sort of things, they weren't really that accessible when people were on, in that on-premises world, which is why that's probably that's why they've had that full carte blanche access. But I like what we've talked about. It's about now changing the ways of working and getting that process. I'm doing. Unfortunately, I can't say too much. But I'm doing a lot of work around OS level, like so official sensitive. So with a client, a couple of clients who work at that level, and security compliance. Following NIST guidelines, following NCSE best practice, and having that governance in place is huge. And again, so we're really working heavily to get that IAM piece right. And get that structured and that governance in that structure, those guardrails in there, and things like purview for the compliance is going to be key, as well as that getting the IAM right. And the conversations I've had with them is all about getting the identity correct, because everything else is going to sit on top of that.
Yeah. I think moving on slightly, I think one of my favorite features around the identity and access management piece is the risky sign-ons and then the ability to detect that impossible travel between a user logging on, let's say they're logging in London in the UK, and then 20 minutes later they're logging in New York, extending those types of controls out, which I think is really, really beneficial, especially to a company that has a lot of people that travel around a lot, with the inclusions and exclusions of the groups and so on and so forth, Shabaz. So, real world examples of those perhaps that you've worked with?
The risky signing, the travel element a bit less, but with that whole sort of conditional access piece, which is what kind of I think which is what we're talking about a lot around that. And again, it's that piece about your corporate sort of devices, isn't it? The historically everyone's had their own mobile, had corporate. When we had your corporate mobile device, you had your personal mobile device, and you balance between the two. With the way like Microsoft 365's gone now, you can onboard personal devices and have that segregation between your personal stuff and your work stuff, and that's all in there because of sort of the conditional access stuff and having those features there. So you can onboard personal devices without having to. And it's about, again, that compliance piece as well, having compliant devices onboarded within your network as well. And like you've mentioned, the security, it's risky sign-ins and the exempt in certain countries from. So if someone does try and sign in from China or something like that, that's alerted. Your security team are alerted to that. I've not got as much real life examples on the travel element, but definitely the sort of MFA sort of access controls that you can put in, like you mentioned, risky sign-ins and the stuff around mobile devices and getting them compliant as well. Done quite a bit around that, and
I think
that's a good balance.
I think with MFA, isn't there now even different levels of control on MFA as well? So it's not just a binary thing. Do you want MFA or not? You've got those levels of, do you want strong MFA? Are you going to insist that somebody has a kind of a FIDO device to sign in? So it's getting very granular. And I think linking those conditional access controls with the authentication context means now, based on a sensitivity label of a group, team or site, you can dictate what level of access people have and for how long and from what devices.
Just again, we're talking about compliance. Sorry, Nick, you mentioned compliance. Someone's triggered in my mind. The one thing that I think I've seen a lot of now, more companies moving to Teams and SharePoint Online. Data's everywhere, and keeping that compliant and secure is paramount. And that's what I think is what companies are going to struggle with. The just a sheer amount of, we've got companies who don't really have much governance around Teams, and they've got Teams chats and team sites for the sake of it, and the Teams channels. Controlling that and getting that compliant and secure is going to be a huge piece, I think, for a lot of organisations moving into that sort of area.
Yeah, and I think you would mention it then as well, Nikki, on the container level, so you can add MFA into your most secure ones. So if you've got, like Shabaz was saying, then any Teams channels or any even SharePoint repositories, the sites themselves that are highly classified, just hypothetically speaking, then you can wrap more conditional access elements into that and say, well, if I know you've MFA'd into your account, but to get onto this particular SharePoint site, because with it being our most severe data, then we're going to request that again, and so on and so forth. And you touched on that just a minute ago, Nikki.
It's funny, we're here talking about how how all the features that we can use to secure lockdown. People are going to think, well, how are we supposed to get any work done? But when they try to work and everything's so locked down, how we're going to and we've spoken about that balance. But to give people an example of what can happen if these things aren't in place, my daughter's school, I'm not going to name the school, I don't want to bad press for them, but my daughter's school had basically a teacher clicked on a link, an email got a link, and they got hacked basically. And it's not just one school, it's five or six schools within their within that sort of organisation, and that was November. We're going into February now, and they're still having massive problems. And it's all because they didn't have the guardrails that we're talking about in place. And my daughter can't get any homework; it's all online. They're so reliant on online work and online homework. My daughter's not been getting maths and English homework for months, and she loves it. But I'm not happy, right?
Not for the kid, but yeah.
But my point is, and it's not just one school; it's like 5 or 6 schools within their family of schools is around our area. But going back to the point is, if they'd have got all this stuff right that we're talking about, they'd had the MFA in place, they'd had the protection on their data, they'd had compliance and all this sort of stuff right. 3 months on, we wouldn't be in this place, and they'd have been protected right up front. But it's really affecting them as a school, and it's affecting the kids. The reason I'm speaking about it is just to tell people what can happen if you don't get any of this right.
Yeah, agreed. Well, it's funny when you said, when we first kicked off, you said you don't know you need MFA until you need MFA. And, way back, I say way back, more than just before the pandemic, actually, I was working for a customer there, and they turned around to us and said, I'm not going to force MFA on my users because it's too much for them to do. I don't want them to be out of their ordinary morning routine when it comes to logging on and so on and so forth. They themselves got compromised. They ended up paying out £16,000 £6,000 or whatever it was in spam invoices and so on and so forth. And as soon as they realized the monetary loss that they had, they're like, okay, yeah, we definitely need MFA now. And it's like, well, you've just spent 16 grand that you could have really done without spending, taking that money away from you. If you'd have turned an MFA 3 months ago when we suggested it, you'd still be right now. So like you say, it's only when you get compromised do you really see the value of all these.
Yeah, but there's ways around that. User adoptions workshops and documentation and user
Training.
guides. It's all training. Those are such simple ways. The simple answers to that argument in my case. It's not an argument. There are very easy ways to make that user experience smooth and easy. But it's a tough conversation to have when they've been compromised.
Oh, tell me about it.
And I think people are beginning to be aware of this in their personal lives as well. If you want to get access to your banking, even when I do my online shopping, I have to go to my app on my credit card or, and authorize a transaction. There's always kind of two ways to do it when it comes to monetary things. So I think people are getting more and more used to it. The problem that I come across, not so much in the UK, but some other countries where they've got stricter rules on when people need to work and getting work information on your personal mobile device. So it's for some organisation, having any work information, even the Microsoft Authenticator app on your mobile phone, that's kind of, I think, the biggest blocker. That tends to be drilled down when you've got frontline workers. So when you kind of think about all of the licenses Microsoft give out, probably less than 10% have the full E5, all singing, all dancing, all security and compliance. You've probably got, probably 80% of them are small and medium businesses. A lot of those are starting to roll out frontline workers now. And the whole thing is just trying to get people to say, yes, you can use your personal mobile phone and have the Authenticator app on it, have the Teams app on it, and you can secure it. But I think that's kind of, again, a big blocker I'm finding.
No, I mean, again, again, what sort of size business you're working with, I suppose. I mean, I do more sort of public sector, and my own experience is that they're more with the segregation you can have between personal and corporate data. They're more open to having data, so to speak, and all that sort of stuff on people's personal devices. Because again, my own experience is people don't want to have two phones. They don't want to have a work phone and a personal phone. If they can have their, while they're out or while they're, while a lot, especially in IT as well, a lot of jobs are kind of 24/7. People want to have their email on a night just to make sure nothing's kicked off, especially like service management sort of roles. I've seen quite a bit of an adoption with people having their own personal devices enrolled into the sort of their corporate structures.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a lot of that because I think that also saves that corporation money when it comes to devices, and they can obviously split those two profiles out, like you're saying, Shabaz.
Yeah.
And I do see it becoming more of a trend now. Now, predominantly, I've just worked with financial services, and they've been very strict to it's banking data, regardless of what it is.
Yes,
it's for the organization. Here's a corporate phone. But obviously that comes with a cost. It comes with a cost with managing the phone and the contracts and so on and so forth. But there is some leniency coming around now where people are saying, okay, well, we know Intune can provide two different types of profiles on that phone, and the data from a corporate perspective is completely separate. They can't be copy and pasted between the two of them because you can put corporate policies in place for DLP on the phone and so on and so forth. So I do think that's more of a trend that's coming. But I do love the fact that Microsoft have looked into this and said, you can actually use a personal device here. You can use your camera. We can't see your text messages that are on your phone. We can't see your personal emails. We can't see your contact list on the phone. They are completely and utterly separate with two different identities.
Yeah, and again, the technology is there for us to use, but it's. I mean, Ryan, you might have mentioned that the customer you were, they didn't even realize they had PIM. It's about organizations understanding. Okay, we have this. We have E5. What are we actually licensed for? Well, we're licensed for Intune. We're licensed for all the compliance stuff. We're licensed for the app protect. We can get all. How can we make use of it? And what I am seeing is, like, I think you might have mentioned, a lot of organisations, be it public or private, are tightening the belts a bit, and like I said, a cost saver is not giving everybody a corporate phone. It's a very quick win, and the technology now and the services are there. We've spoken about some of them today, and I'm seeing a more of a, like you said, you're seeing starting to see financial services where data protection is paramount. This is UK speaking person. I'm not, even though I'm UK based, I work with UK companies mainly. Nikki, I don't know what have you found in Europe? Are you work with European
Yes.
companies as well?
So I think it all depends really. I work with companies all over the place. So, I'm working with like a legal company and they're slowly getting around moving to the cloud. They were very, very versed in the first thing. We've been working with them for 3 years on this, and now they're saying we're going cloud first. They suddenly realise, but it's taking that long time, that user education, working with them to build their business case to get the full E5 suite. And then building that plan, because otherwise it's like when you go in as a child, go into that sweet shop, you see all of those sweets there and you just don't know which one to pick first. You're kind of like looking around like this. And I think that's the same with the Microsoft product suites. It's building that roadmap and building that maturity model for them, making sure that, things are done in the right order and kind of building on that. So, things like that identity and access management comes in at number one, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And the conversation I've had a lot last year anyway, towards the back end of last year, was around technology as a cloud as a whole. If we look at it 3 years ago, and we all know what happened 3 years ago, COVID hit. We look at how, I think compared to now, how immature cloud was. MFA was it wasn't a new thing, but hardly, a lot of companies, we're still seeing companies not adopting it, but people were thinking about it, looking at it, they weren't adopting it. PIM, RBAC, no one was really using it properly, all the governance stuff. And because of COVID, because overnight, literally, people around the world had to go to cloud, and they had to, remote working, should I say, they didn't have to go to cloud. They had to look at remote working and facilitating users, working from home and remotely. I feel like the sort of services that we're talking about have matured so quickly in such a short space of time. In a situation where, say, there was no COVID, I don't think half of these services like PIM, RBAC, Purview, all these compliance things, I don't think they'd be half as evolved as they have been, because Microsoft have really had to push development because of the last 3 years and how we're all working from home. That when I was 4 years ago, that wasn't possible in my job.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think the adoption rate since COVID hit for a plethora of cloud solutions within Microsoft has been increased tenfold. And one of the main things that came up, apart from the adoption of Teams so people could collaborate, was the login monitoring and alerting piece around IAM and user access and who's gaining access to what, when has somebody logged in. Not that they're micromanaging their employees, but they want to understand, who's logging in from where, what are they accessing, and so on and so forth. So we've got the likes of the default auditing from Microsoft that people can take advantage of to understand who's gained access to into what. You've got the advanced auditing. You have my new favorite tool, Microsoft Sentinel, but you've also got the extended pieces around app governance and stuff within cloud app security and so on and so forth. So even these tools are extending the IAM ability to provide you with not only login monitoring and reporting, but also a governance perspective as well, right, Shabaz?
Yeah, and the one thing you forgot was Microsoft Defender for Cloud. That integration that all that monitoring and reporting, IAM can integrate fully now with, it was like 3 different services. I can't remember, Azure Security Center, Security Defender, there are a couple more, I think. But that Microsoft Defender for Cloud piece now has that great integration with IAM and compliance, and you can report on it all across the board. Endpoint, it's got, and there's Cloud Defender for IAM as well, and identity. That whole suite is so powerful. It's probably a different session, I suppose, but that whole piece is so powerful now, and what it empowers clients to do is have that level of visibility. And I don't you mentioned I think it's micromanagement all. It's having that level of protection and that level of visibility over what is happening. It's so big. Your tenancy can grow so huge. You can have so many things in there. it needs to be some sort of control and visibility around it. I think that's what they give us. I think it's having that visibility, which is key.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I've and I think that you think there's in organisation, you've probably got millions of messages being recorded every day, whether it's to do with identity and access, whether you're accessing content or services. And it's not possible for people to sit there and be monitoring it. So, Microsoft have got that artificial intelligence to be able to go away, and it's looking for risk, isn't it? It can identify that, oh, Nikki's always logging in from this similar location from this particular device. Is it impossible travel, or is she doing something that's slightly different? And then it can pull out all of these sort of things, even if it's things like large volumes of file access, for example, which could indicate that you've got some sort of malware attack, etc. Again, it can say this looks unusual, through to insider risk, communication compliance. It's all of those capabilities. Microsoft pull all of that together without the need of buying third-party tools.
Indeed.
It's all part of your license as well. Probably again, do companies know they've got it licensed for it?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be very surprised that, the solutions that we've just spoke about today, how many people listening to this that, are in a CTO, CIO role or a non-heavily technical based role are like, that would advance my organization. That would, I could take this to the relevant people to get those controls in place, whether it be risky sign-ons, whether it be impossible travel, more predominantly, just enabling the very easy MFA, and then having that plethora of information when it comes to logging, monitoring, reporting, wherever you're grabbing it from. And Microsoft Dart team, the first thing they do is start looking at identities, who's been compromised, when they have when they have a hack or whatever the case may be. So I think you're right, Shabaz. I think over the last few years since the pandemic, the adoption rate for these tools have gone through the roof, but it's exposed them more to other people to say, well, we're using this at our business and we've got this advantage from it, whether it be PIM, we provide just-in-time access now. And that's when people start to hear about it more. So great podcast.
So if people are listening today and they haven't started really on their identity access management journey, what would you say would be the one key takeaway from today's session?
I think it'd be get your governance and identity right wherever it is. If it's on premises and you want to make that, you want to start that cloud adoption, the first thing is get your governance right at the source. Once you've got that right, then you can start thinking about getting all the good stuff that we've spoken about, MFA compliance. But there's no point in taking all the problems that you've got with your IAM and your governance on premises to the cloud with you. Get it right at the base first, the source, and then do that interaction with Azure AD. Start using MFA, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of change.
Don't be afraid of upsetting your users as well. It's for their advantage also. Like we were saying before, a little bit of training. The emails going back and forth. How to adopt MFA, how to adopt payments, so on and so forth. Take them through that training. At the end of the day, it's a huge advantage to everyone involved.
100%.
Excellent. I think we're almost at the time, right, Nikki?
I think we are, yes. So thank you very much, Shabaz, for joining us today and giving us an overview of kind of how important that identity piece is in compliance, because it is the front door. That's the people, that's how they get access. Without identity, they don't get in. So it's so important that we make sure we put the relevant controls in place. Thank you very much for your time today. And we see you all next time on our podcast.
Yep. Cheers.
Thank you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.